Welcome to Annapolis Mosaics. Our program spotlights people in our community who are involved in activities designed to promote good human relations. I am Michael Keller, the chair of the Annapolis Human Relations Commission and your host. The commission is a city board that seeks to promote equal opportunity and to eliminate discrimination. My guest today is Michael Robinson, who is the program director at Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated. Michael, welcome to Annapolis Mosaics.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you very much for having us.
Well, tell our viewers what Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated is.
Great. We are a fair housing organization, and actually we go by the name of BNI, which does stand for Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated. BNI was established in 1959, almost a decade before the 1968 Civil Rights Fair Housing Act, making housing discrimination illegal across the country. BNI was created by a group of like-minded individuals who focused primarily at that time on the city of Baltimore in hopes to create integrated communities, to eliminate housing blight and discrimination, to reduce and eradicate redlining, which was a serious practice taking place in Baltimore in the late 50s, early 60s, as well as blockbusting. So with like-minded individuals came together, concerned citizens, and they created Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated. And our primary mission has been and continues to be creating fair housing opportunities for people to live where they choose to live, Michael, so they can have access to some of the better qualities and aspects of life. So BNI has been doing this for well over 50 years. I think this is our 54th year, and we've been pretty darn successful at helping integrate communities, but still a lot of work to do.
Okay, well, let's talk about the programs and services that are offered by BNI, and let's start with the issue of fighting housing discrimination, because that's what you're really major focus is on. And let's begin by talking about some terms. And I don't want to assume that our viewers necessarily know what these things are. What is fair housing?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. That's a great question. Fair housing is an opportunity for individuals, despite their race, their creed, their color, their ethnicity, their national origin, their religion, to live where they choose to live, to have an opportunity to live in quality housing anywhere they choose to live, and to be given a fair access and opportunity to move into those communities and neighborhoods. That's fair housing. Not to have barriers or hurdles placed in front of them that prevents them from accessing some of the better quality of housing.
Okay. Used another term too, redlining. What did that refer to? How did that get its name?
It came about in the process where speculators or housing purchasers or realtors would offer substantial credit, to people who would live in certain areas and would say, this is a great spot, this is green, it's good to go, good to move in there, we can offer you mortgages and loans to move into these communities. This is yellow, move a little cautiously around this area as it relates to offering loans and to prospective home buyers. And then redlining was stay away from these areas, stay away from this part of the community and the citizens within, because they're less likely to be able to repay back the loans and things of that nature. So because of that, and we get the term redlining, and typically redlining impacted neighborhoods of color where they were unable to get the loans and things to purchase quality housing. So that's essentially how the term redlining came into place.
And I remember actually seeing a map that was drawn up, and you actually saw the green communities surrounded, and you saw the red areas.
Yes. And if you think back to that map you saw, I know my executive director, Robert Strupp, showed you that map. And I think if you look back to that, recall that map, that red area, in this case, happened to be the city of Baltimore.
Right.
And those outlying areas represented the suburbs and other communities where, we were more than happy to offer you, mortgages and loans in these communities. But, certainly when you move further into the city, we were saying, stop, we're not going to do it. So that's the term redlining.
And how about the term blockbusting? We've heard that too.
Yes, and again, part of BNI's history was to try to eradicate and eliminate this whole issue of blockbusting, and basically it's about flipping neighborhoods. And what you would see is that perhaps the first African-American couple or family would move into a certain neighborhood, and realtors, speculators, we want to call them, maybe go to the neighborhood and say, listen, this is the beginning of a influx of this particular population. You might want to begin to sell your property. We can purchase it for you at this rate. And then, so basically breaking up the block, busting up the block. And then typically, reach back out to those other communities and say, look, we can buy a home in this community. Now we know this is a great community, it's an excellent community, we want to live there, and actually charging more to the incoming population, but actually pay less for the exiting population, thus busting up neighborhoods, busting up blocks, and not creating integrated communities, which is what BNI actually stands for. And so BNI was on the forefront in the state of Maryland in trying to eradicate and stop blockbusting.
What does the law require, both federal law and state law, when it comes to fair housing?
It requires that that realtors and property management companies actually provide equal access and prefer information to anyone pursuing or purchasing or renting a home. So you're not, by law, you're not allowed to deny information or falsify information or give false information about the perspective of renting or purchasing a home. In a nutshell, for housing ensures that people, based upon what the federal government has as 7 protected classes: race, sex, national origin, religion, disability, familial status, and I missed one. I think I may have missed one. And race are not factors that prevent you from renting or purchasing a home. So by law, you cannot discriminate from any one of those 7 protected classes. And then on the state level, there are a variety of other protected classes that people cannot deny housing for. And here in Annapolis, which is where we are today, one of the protected classes is a source of income, and that means that a person who wants to purchase a home or rent a property should not be denied that access because of their source of income. And typically, people associate source of income with housing vouchers, but it could be any number of things: disability, veteran benefits, whatever. In a lot of cases, people say, "I don't want to rent." Your source of income is not something that we view as employment or employment income, and that's here in the city of Annapolis discriminatory, and we've been working hard to try to make that a statewide protected class.
And in fact, the Human Relations Commission has had cases in the past year of examples of instances in which people have been denied on the basis of Section 8 housing vouchers, yes. And we've successfully mediated those complaints. How can a person recognize that they may have been discriminated against in terms of housing? Are there really telltale signs on that?
I wish there were, Mike. I really do. I wish there was. You can walk away from that moment and say, I absolutely felt that I was discriminated against, so I was. It's difficult. It's very subtle. I mean, in the 60s, when the Fair Housing Act was enacted, housing discrimination was more blatant, more prevalent, obvious. It wasn't difficult to see. But as time has moved on through education and outreach, people begin to understand what the law is and how what violates the law. And as a result of that, those who choose to practice housing discrimination have learned to hide some of their practices. I would typically tell someone that if you went to, for example, to rent a property, and you notice that maybe there's not a lot of diversity within that community, and you might want to just find out, you may walk away feeling that, okay, I was treated okay, but were you really? Did you receive all the information that was possibly available about the complex? Did you walk away with materials? Did you walk away with an opportunity to come back? Was your application denied? Were you told one thing on the phone, Michael, and you told something different when you arrived? Those are some of the telltale signs, but obviously you can always check back too. If you say a house is placed for rent, you go back, and now it's not for rent, whatever. Those could be some telltale signs. And we absolutely say, if you feel that way, you should contact BNI.
Okay. What are some of the activities that BNI engages in dealing with fair housing matters? What are some of your programs and services that specifically promote fair housing?
Well, one of the biggest things we do, Michael, is education and outreach, but I know you want to talk about that later. So what I'll say is that we try to take a proactive approach and offer trainings and workshops to property managers, landlords, housing providers in general about the fair housing law, but also we take another proactive approach, and we try to work with city officials to make sure they understand the importance of fair housing and what is fair housing and what constitutes a violation of fair housing or someone's housing rights. And by having those kind of conversations with members of the city council, as we did recently in the city of Bowie with some of their key staff, and as we've done throughout the state of Maryland, having some of that aspects of conversations and education helps spread the message that we really want to have an opportunity for everyone in the state of Maryland to live where they choose to live and to live in integrated communities. And it really helps when we educate the city officials, the town leaders, the legislators about what that process looks like and how they can help protect individuals' housing rights.
We're going to take a break now, but when we return, I will be speaking with Michael about what BNI does in terms of tenant-landlord relations.
Hi, I'm Annapolis Mayor Josh Cohen, and I want to tell you about a new free way for you to enjoy downtown Annapolis. Our unique shops, our dining, our entertainment, and our historic maritime charm.
Did you know that Annapolis has a new circulator trolley that will shuttle you free from one end of the central business district to the other? Well, after parking at Knighton or Park Place Garage for just $5 a day, you can get on the circulator by simply raising your hand anywhere along the route and see what downtown Annapolis has to offer. For more information, go to annapolis.gov and click on circulator.
We're talking today with Michael Robinson, who is the Program Director at Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated, or BNI, an organization which works on behalf of fair housing. Michael, what does BNI do in terms of identifying some of the major issues and problems that arise between tenants and landlords? What are the most common ones that you come in contact with?
Great. I'll start by saying this, Michael. BNI has been involved in the mitigating or the developing of positive relationships between tenants and landlords since 1979. It has now become one of our most essential programs, and it's a very impactful program in this sense that we receive over 20,000 calls annually from across the state. So while it says Baltimore Neighborhoods Incorporated, BNI, we are a statewide agency, and as a result of that, we receive calls from all over the state, and sometimes out of the state, but mainly our 20,000 calls represent callers from within the state of Maryland, and we do get quite a few calls from Anne Arundel as well from the city of Annapolis. Okay. But we kind of combine the Annapolis call with the city of with the county of Anne Arundel. So not to make anyone in Annapolis upset, but we do that in a lot of ways. But I can tell you this, Michael, that typically our biggest calls are breach of lease and failure to pay rent. And when we take a look at what it looks like here in Anne Arundel County and Annapolis, it falls pretty much along those same lines. And I brought a little bit of the data with me, so if you don't mind, I just kind of
Sure, absolutely.
Here in Anne Arundel County, which encompasses, and for our data purposes, the city of Annapolis, although we know you're separately incorporated, is that the breach of lease, we received so far this year 104 calls from tenants and landlords around the issue of breaches of lease. We also received over 70 calls to date for failure to pay rent, which is typically what we see statewide. We've also received a couple, 25 calls from the proper vacate notice, quiet enjoyment, rent escrow, repairs, security deposits is a big one. So those are just some of the calls, type of calls we receive regularly from tenants and from landlords. And what I would say about our tenant landlord hotline, there are other hotlines that deal with tenant issues or maybe deal with landlord issues, but we are the only one statewide that deals with both, and we do it in an impartial way. So I think that's what makes BNI unique and has made us unique for the past several years, is that we offer impartial information, not legal advice, but we do offer information that's grounded in the legal aspects of what's law here in the state of Maryland.
And you have a lot of counselors too.
We have a lot of
Staff.
counselors. We have a lot of counselors on staff. Our operating hours are Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we have a toll-free number. If I'm
Absolutely,
okay.
share it.
The toll-free number is 800-847-6007. Or you can dial 410-243-6007. We have several operators on call. They take many calls on a daily basis, and they do the best they can to get you on and off, because we have a lot of callers in queue. And we try to give you the best information as possible. We also produce what we call a statewide guide to tenant-landlord relationships. It's a state guide that has all the laws that govern the tenant-landlord relationship throughout the state. That book is for sale. You can purchase that book by visiting our website at www.bni-maryland.org, or just call the hotline number, and we can take an order over the phone. That book sells for $39.39, if I'm allowed to say that.
Sure.
Okay. And we also have supplement guides that represent different jurisdictions throughout the state, and we have a supplement guide which has all the laws regarding local jurisdictions around tenant-landlord relationships, and we have one for the county, Anne Arundel County, which also has information in there about the city of Annapolis as relates to tenant-landlord relationship and laws. So for those who are out there who are prospective landlords, want to maybe rent their properties, we strongly suggest that you purchase and you get one of these guidebooks, so you would know what your rights and responsibilities are as a landlord, and also what those are for your tenants.
Well, I find it very interesting that you serve both landlords as well as tenants, because most people think of it, well, that this is a tenant organization, but you're not the tenant organization. You provide services to both parties.
Absolutely.
And could you give our viewers a sense of to what extent landlords make use of this?
Oh, when we look at our data, it's nearly 50-50, Michael. I mean, we look at that and we say that just as many landlords call with concerns, questions about how to address a particular issue. How do I address the eviction process?
Right.
What is the eviction process? And it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, or there are some basic tenets of what an eviction process should be. And we get that from landlords who call and say, I just want this tenant out. And we explain to them there's a process, it's a legal process. This is a legal process, it has to be a court process. You just can't stick a note on the person's door and say, you got to be out by tomorrow. It doesn't work that way. And we get just as many calls from landlords as we do from tenants around the issue of what's in a proper eviction and what's proper notice around being notified that I have to move out. And security deposit is a big one, and we get just as many calls from landlords as we do from tenants.
BNI also works a great deal in terms of community education and outreach, which you referred to earlier. Could you share with our viewers the activities and programs and services that you provide to advance outreach and education?
Absolutely. We have we were fortunate, and it may speak in a lot of ways, Michael, to the volume of our work and the quality of our work, that a year ago we received a 3-year grant from the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, what we know as HUD, to do fair housing investigation and enforcement. But also a component of that work is in the area of education and outreach. And we do this from a statewide perspective, that we go and we try to have education outreach opportunities to inform the public about fair housing laws and tenant-landlord rights and responsibilities. And we do this by conducting what we call regional seminars. And we do them in different parts of the state, and we invite those communities that are adjacent to that particular anchor where we're having the actual seminar to come out and learn more about fair housing. So we were doing one this year in Anne Arundel County. We haven't picked the location, so we may be doing it here in Annapolis. And we'll invite the nearby jurisdictions, housing providers and landlords, prospective landlords, and anyone else who has any interest in understanding what fair housing means and what the rights and responsibilities are of being a tenant or a landlord, to come to this workshop and learn as much. And we invite a variety of presenters. It's not just simply BNI just sitting there and giving you information about fair housing. But we invite a variety of different speakers in to come in and talk about all aspects of housing. And by doing that, we hope we educate the community about how to protect their rights and understanding. And when you do see something you think you may have been violated against, who you should contact. And obviously you contact BNI, but there are other agencies who we bring to the table to have this discussion, who can provide the community with resources and information on how to move forward if they feel they have their housing rights violated.
Right. BNI also advocates for disabled persons on accessible housing.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yes.
What does that entail?
Well, from a investigative perspective, Michael, one of the things that we're asked to do as far as being a sub-grantee or a grantee from the Department of Housing and Urban Development is to try to promote and advocate for people with disabilities to have fair access to housing. And one of the ways that we do that work here at BNI is that we actually go into complexes and particularly newly developed complexes to see if they're in compliance with the new design and construction requirements to make sure that housing and housing units are accessible for people with disabilities. But we also go into these properties and we conduct our own measurements. If someone were to give us a call and say, I'm living in a unit and I'm having a difficult time navigating around, we can go and investigate in a lot of ways if this unit is in compliance with requirements as outlined in the Fair Housing Act, particularly as a modified 1988, which brought in the whole issue of adults with disabilities. And if we find that they're out of compliance, we do a lot of things. We try to have this conversation with the housing provider about how to make reasonable modifications or accommodations so this person can completely enjoy the unit. And if we see that this is not happening, this is a systemic issue here, we can file a complaint on behalf of that resident and if need be, involve and evoke litigation. But we try to do it through the education process and collaboration, but if necessary, we will have forward these complaints on the Housing and Urban Development, and we've had also litigated on behalf of BNI and the client to bring resolution and to create a remedy for this situation. Right.
BNI supports integrated communities.
Yes.
One of your beliefs, to quote the information from your organization, is that good neighbors come in all colors and abilities.
Absolutely.
How do you work to achieve this goal? How do we achieve that goal? If you look at the residential patterns of so many communities, they really don't reflect that.
True, absolutely.
And so, what do we do to make more progress?
It's a term, and I'd like to introduce it to the viewers. I know it's in the housing industry, it's a term that everyone knows, and we hear it frequently. It's called affirmatively furthering fair housing, and how we do that here at BNI is again through a little bit of education outreach aspect, is through being involved in community organizations, joining committees, becoming part of coalitions around the whole issue of housing, filing administrative complaints against local jurisdictions who are creating and developing barriers that prevent these integrated communities. And we are involved in a couple of those type of administrative complaints that I'm not at liberty to speak to now, but we get involved in those. And the administrative complaint is similar to a civic action where we just actually have the Department of Housing and Urban Development and our organization, like organizations, and the jurisdiction at the table to discuss how we can affirmatively further for our housing based upon what we're seeing here. Another way, Michael, is what they call analysis of impediments. Each jurisdiction is required, they receive federal dollars from HUD to conduct analysis of impediment. And we review this analysis of impediment. And when we see that there appears to be steps that are not taken to affirmatively further for housing, which integrates communities, we begin to investigate into those communities, to include going in and posing as potential home buyers and renters to determine if based upon any of those 7 protected classes I mentioned earlier, are welcome into the community. And if we find that they are not welcome, we then begin the process of filing a complaint with the Housing and Urban Development, or with the local Commission on Human Relations, or with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and bring litigations to create that remedy to open these communities up for people with diverse backgrounds.
Does BNI make use of volunteers?
Absolutely. I'm glad you asked. We always are looking for volunteers. We use our volunteers as part of our investigative process. And typically the term that we use, which is not, quote, the term that they actually use in the housing industry, is mystery shoppers. We are always looking for individuals who have a social justice background, spirit, who want to come in and make a difference. And we can use these individuals to come in. We train them on how to, pose or serve as a mystery shopper and come in and help us try to determine if individuals are being treated fairly in their search for adequate housing. So if you're interested in volunteering with BNI and becoming one of our testers and find out more about how you can impact and housing opportunities for all citizens of Maryland, you can just reach us at 410-243-4468 and ask for me. I'm Dr. Michael Robinson, and we'd be more than happy to have you come in and we can go through a background check, obviously, and then there's a training. Training's about 3 hours. The background check, it takes about a week to get back, and then we can move on there. And we do offer a small stipend, nothing you get rich on, a small stipend for those who actually volunteer to help us further for housing in the state of Maryland.
Could you also mention again the website for BNI?
Absolutely, www.bni-maryland, that's the word spelled out, .org. And there's a website that's chocked full of information about fair housing, the work that BNI does, and please visit the website. If you have any questions, there's an opportunity to ask questions from the tenant landlord or for housing. And and you can also call BNI if you have a housing complaint or you know someone who may have feels they've been violated. You can contact BNI at 410-243-4468, and we can take your housing complaint and then begin to investigate your concern.
Thank you for viewing our program today, and please join us again on Annapolis Mosaics. If you would like more information about the Annapolis Human Relations Commission, jot down the information that's on your screen. You can reach us at 410-263-7998 or by email at hrcommission@annapolis.gov, or check out our page at the City of Annapolis website. Go to www.annapolis.gov, click on City Government, then on Boards and Commissions, and you can scroll down to the Human Relations Commission page. And always remember the words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who said, "We have flown the air like birds and swum the seas like fishes, but have yet to learn the simple act of walking the earth as brothers and sisters."